They told you to chase success, to grind, to rise, and never rest. They taught you how to build an empire, but never how to build yourself. They gave you goals, but not grounding, deadlines, but not dignity, a paycheck, but not peace. And now we stand in offices full of ambition and people on the verge of collapse. We meet in boardrooms under fluorescent lights, while souls flicker like dying stars. We talk of growth and expansion, while ignoring the quiet shrinking of the human spirit. Let this be the line in the sand. Let this be the moment we remember. A workplace is not just a factory of results, it is a forge of human lives. And if the forge burns too hot, it doesn't strengthen the steel. It shatters it. Workplace health is not a luxury. It is the oxygen of excellence. It is the soil of sustainability. It is the only foundation strong enough to hold the weight of real success. You can't build empires on broken backs. You can't spark innovation in exhausted minds. You can't lead people to greatness while watching them burn at the altar of productivity. Health, real health, is not just physical. It is mental. It is emotional. It is spiritual. It is the full, sacred ecosystem of the human being, supported, protected, honored. And when you protect it, you don't just get better workers. You unlock better people, braver thinkers, bolder creators, stronger leaders, people who rise not just because they have to, but because they are well enough to. Because here's the truth. A person can't pour from an empty cup. They can't build your vision while carrying invisible wounds. They can't give their best in an environment that only takes. The world doesn't need more burnt-out employees. It needs lit-up souls. And that starts with a decision. To design a culture that doesn't deplete but restores. That doesn't demand perfection, but encourages progress. That doesn't see people as tools, but as the treasure. Because every spreadsheet, every milestone, every record-breaking quarter was written by hands that needed rest, achieved by minds that needed clarity, built by hearts that needed meaning. You want more productivity? Start with presence. You want more results? Start with restoration. You want more innovation? Start with inner peace. The body is not a machine, it is a message. And when it starts whispering, fatigue, pain, anxiety, it's not betraying you. It's trying to save you. But the culture taught us to ignore it, to numb it, to shame it. Push through, they said. Sleep is for the weak. Whoever stays latest wins. But what if they don't? What if the one who learns to pause wins longer? What if the one who honors their limits expands their potential? What if the strongest ones aren't the ones who hide their pain, but the ones who face it? Workplace health is not about beanbags and fruit bowls. It's not a once-a-year seminar. It's not a corporate wellness app no one opens. It's the air your people breathe, the rhythm of your day, the invisible contract that says, you matter here. Not just what you do, but who you are. It's leaders who check in before they check stats. It's teams who build trust before building timelines. It's schedules that make space for breath. It's systems that don't confuse burnout with brilliance. Because true brilliance comes from those who are alive on the inside, not just functioning on the outside. A healthy workplace doesn't wait for breakdowns. It builds up. It strengthens. It anticipates. It sees the storm before the crash. It acts. Because real leadership doesn't just drive performance. It protects people. And when people are protected, when they feel safe, seen, and supported, they don't just perform, they soar. And when they soar, they carry everything with them. The work, the mission, the brand, the energy. Because a person who feels whole doesn't just clock in, they light up the room. They turn ordinary into excellence. They turn challenges into chances. They breathe belief into broken systems. That's the power of wholeness. That's the power of health. Because make no mistake, the greatest asset in any company is not the product, not the process, not the platform. It's the people. And the health of those people physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually will determine the ceiling of the business every single time. Tired minds don't innovate. Anxious teams don't collaborate. Burnt-out leaders don't inspire. Disconnected souls don't build legacies. So what do? We stop treating health as an afterthought. We stop hiding exhaustion behind performance. We stop measuring productivity by pain tolerance. We start recognizing that a healthy culture is not just good ethics, it's good economics. Retention rises. Creativity explodes. Absenteeism drops. Loyalty strengthens. People stay not because they have to, but because they want to. Because this place gives life, not just takes it. But that only happens when someone chooses to go first. It starts with one leader who dares to rest without apology. One manager who makes space for honesty. One team that builds safety into their schedule. One voice that says, it's okay to take care of yourself here. One culture that understands the best investment is not another campaign. It's in the human soul. Because the soul of a business is found in the health of its people. And when the soul is fed, the business flourishes. Not temporarily, not conditionally, but sustainably. Because real performance is not pulled from pressure. It flows from purpose. And purpose can't survive in a toxic climate. Purpose needs air. It needs room to breathe. It needs a body that isn't just functioning but thriving. A mind that isn't just analyzing but imagining. A heart that isn't just enduring but expanding. And when you create a workplace where that kind of thriving is the norm, not the exception, you won't need to push people. They'll pull themselves. Not because they're afraid, but because they're on fire. Because a person on fire with purpose is unstoppable. They don't just complete tasks, they redefine what's possible. They don't wait for instructions, they initiate revolutions. They don't just follow culture, they are the culture. And all of it, every ounce of that brilliance is only possible when the system supports the soul. When the workplace is not a battlefield, but a base camp for greatness. You see, too many companies want world-class outcomes without creating world-class environments. They want innovation, but feed their people anxiety. They want loyalty, but give out pressure. They want high output from people running on fumes. That's not leadership, that's exploitation. Real leadership understands the law of harvest. You don't reap where you haven't sown. You don't demand results where you've denied rest. You don't expect excellence in an environment that erodes energy. The human being is not a resource. They are the source of all creativity, all connection, all momentum. And the way we care for that source determines everything. So what do we feed it? We feed it clarity, not confusion. We feed it trust, not fear. We feed it autonomy, not micromanagement. We feed it purpose, not just policies. We feed it rhythm, not burnout, disguised as hustle. Because hustle without health is a slow form of self-destruction. It looks shiny at first, long hours, relentless pace, constant movement, but beneath it, the foundation cracks. Relationships suffer, minds fracture, passion fades, and one day the engine dies, not with a bang, but a whisper. I can't do this anymore. But it doesn't have to end like that. We can choose differently. We can create cultures where ambition and alignment live together, where discipline and wellness walk side by side, where growth doesn't require sacrifice of the soul. Because the truth is, you can have both. You can build fast and still breathe deeply. You can chase goals and protect your people. You can run the race without losing your humanity along the way. And when you do, something rare happens. People don't just survive work. They're transformed by it. They leave better than they arrived. They take what they learned into their families, their communities, their future, and the impact ripples far beyond the walls of any office. That's the kind of work that lasts. That's the kind of leadership the world needs. That's the kind of workplace health that changes lives and changes the world. Then let's keep going. Because transformation doesn't stop at the walls of your building. It spreads, it echoes, it multiplies. A healthy workplace doesn't just change employees. It changes generations. Because when someone experiences what it feels like to be honored, protected, and empowered at work, they carry that home. They carry that into how they parent, how they love, how they serve. They raise children who believe that work doesn't have to steal your joy. They teach others that success and self-respect are not enemies. They become a living example that you can build something great without destroying yourself in the process. That's how we break cycles. We break them not just with new strategies, but with new standards. The standard that says rest is not laziness, it's leadership. That says silence is not weakness, it's where wisdom is born. That says health is not a perk, it's the price of entry into real greatness. Because you cannot outsource your culture, you cannot delegate care, you cannot fake safety. People know, people feel it. They may not say it out loud, but their body says it. Their energy says it. Their effort says it. The body keeps the score, and so does the soul. And when your workplace keeps draining without pouring back, people will leave. Maybe not physically, but they'll leave emotionally, mentally, spiritually. They'll stop bringing their best. Not out of rebellion, but self-preservation. And that, right there, is the hidden cost of neglecting workplace health. Not just turnover, not just absenteeism, but the quiet quitting of the human heart. So what do? We flip the script. We become places where rest is respected, not ridiculed. Where asking for help is met with support, not suspicion. Where leaders model boundaries instead of breaking them. Where, how are you? Isn't just a greeting, it's a real question. We build systems that breathe, spaces that restore, cultures that don't just reward results, but recognize the humanity behind them. That is not weakness. That is the highest form of strength. Because the workplace should be the safest place a person brings their ambition, not the most dangerous. It should be a greenhouse, not a battlefield. A place where people grow wild, deep, and true. Where talent is not squeezed, but nurtured. Where pressure doesn't crush, it clarifies. And where no one is asked to sacrifice their soul to keep their seat at the table. Because the truth is, no seat is worth it if you have to lose yourself to sit there. Because once you lose yourself, it doesn't matter what you achieve. The numbers may go up. The graphs may rise. The applause may grow louder. But inside, you're empty. Disconnected. Running on fumes and pretending it's fuel. And that is no way to live. Not for a day. Not for a career. Not for a legacy. You were not built to sacrifice your wellness on the altar of performance. You were not designed to trade peace for pressure, presence for productivity. There is another way, a higher standard, a way where ambition doesn't cannibalize identity, where drive doesn't destroy depth, where the pursuit of excellence is not a slow suicide, but a sacred expansion of what it means to be fully alive while you build. That way begins with awareness. With seeing clearly what's been ignored for too long, the cost of constant output with no outlet. The damage of ignoring signals, the tension in the shoulders, the racing thoughts, the shallow breath, the short temper, the endless exhaustion. These are not signs of weakness. They are messages. They are wisdom. They are your body and spirit whispering, you were made for more than this. And more doesn't always mean doing more. Sometimes it means being more present, more protected, more in alignment with your values, your rhythms, your truth. Because if your definition of success requires you to abandon yourself, it's not success. It's self-erasure. So redefine it. Redefine success as sustainability. Redefine leadership as love in action. Redefine high performance as what happens after you've healed, not while you're hemorrhaging. Because when you lead from wholeness, everything changes. People respond. People rise. People remember. Not just what you accomplished, but how you made them feel while doing it. And the way you make people feel, that's the legacy. That's the ripple effect. That's what lasts long after your role, your resume, or your recognition. So build that. Protect that. Speak life into that. Because speaking life is the most powerful act of leadership. When you speak life, you don't just communicate, you awaken. You don't just manage, you minister. You don't just instruct, you ignite. You remind people of who they are before the pressure, before the deadlines, before the fear, before the burnout disguised as achievement. You call them back to themselves. And sometimes that's all it takes. One voice, one moment, one leader who dares to speak life instead of squeezing output, who dares to say, you matter more than the metric. Take a breath, take a beat. You're not a machine, you're human, and that is sacred. That is workplace health, not a program, a posture, not a bonus, a baseline, not an exception. The new expectation. We are not just building companies, we are building climates. And every climate is shaping the emotional weather of the people inside it. Some climates dry people out. Others bring them to bloom. You can feel it the moment you walk in. You can hear it in the tone of conversations. See it in people's eyes. Sense it in the space between tasks, the presence or absence of peace. Because peace is not the absence of work. Peace is the presence of meaning, the presence of alignment, the presence of systems that honor the soul instead of squeezing it dry. And when peace is present, people move differently. They listen longer. They speak more clearly. They create with more courage. They bounce back faster. They stay longer, not because they're stuck, but because they're seen. So here's the invitation. Build your business like it matters, because it does. Build your meetings like they shape mindset, because they do. Build your schedules like they sculpt health, because they will. Build your teams like they carry futures, because they already are. Because one way or another, your workplace is shaping people, either lifting them or slowly eroding them. And every moment is a chance to choose the former. Then let's keep going, because the moment you choose to build differently, you begin to lead differently. Not from a place of control, but from conviction. Not from fear of failure, but from faith in people, not just for profit, but for purpose. Because let's be clear, you can be wildly profitable and still be profoundly broken. You can hit every target, crush every KPI, dominate every market, and still leave behind a wake of worn-out souls who forgot what it felt like to smile at work, forgot what it meant to feel proud, not just productive. But the opposite is also true. You can build something that thrives and heals. You can set records and protect rest. You can scale numbers and deepen humanity. That is not naive. That is the next level of leadership. Because the businesses that will last into the next generation will not just be built on strategy. They will be built on soul, on cultures of courage, on systems of sanity, on leaders who aren't afraid to slow down long enough to see what actually matters. You don't need a bigger team. You need a stronger culture. You don't need more productivity hacks. You need more presence. You don't need to do more. You need to be more aligned, honest, grounded, whole. And when you start showing up like that, your people will too. Because culture isn't written. It's lived. It's modeled. It's breathed in by everyone who walks through the door. And what do they breathe in when they walk into your space? Panic? Pressure? Pretending? Or do they breathe in peace? Purpose? Possibility? Every office is a sanctuary or a stress chamber. Every leader is a healer or a herder. Every decision is a declaration of what you truly value. So what are you declaring? That people matter or just performance? that wellness is wisdom, or that burnout is bravery, that longevity matters more than speed, that who we become in the process matters more than how fast we get there. Because the truth is this: people don't quit jobs. They quit cultures. They quit environments that ignore their needs, silence their voices, and shame their humanity. But they stay where they are seen, where they are safe, where they are strong, not in spite of their humanity, but because of it. Because when people are allowed to be fully human, they become fully powerful. Not the kind of power that dominates, but the kind that builds, that lifts, that inspires. And that kind of power, the internal, unshakable kind, is only possible in an environment where health is non-negotiable, where people aren't asked to check their emotions at the door, where silence isn't mistaken for strength, where care isn't a perk in the company handbook, it's the culture's pulse. Imagine a workplace where tears aren't taboo, where laughter is frequent, where rest is planned, where praise is specific, where people leave meetings feeling more human, not less. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Because emotional safety doesn't slow the company down. It unlocks speed through trust. It erases friction born of fear. It multiplies initiative because people stop waiting to be told and start acting from ownership. People step up when they're not being stepped on. They stretch when they're not being squeezed. They evolve when they're not being erased. And this is the work now, the real work, not just quarterly results, but daily restoration, not just public wins, but private wellness. Because what's the point of growing your company if the people building it are shrinking? What's the use of hitting milestones when the humans crossing them are losing themselves? What legacy are we leaving behind if all we pass down is the echo of exhaustion? No, not here, not us. Let this be the generation that builds differently, that honors health, that protects peace, that reclaims the soul of the workplace. Let the next version of leadership be human. Let the next wave of success be sustainable. Let the next definition of greatness include wholeness. Because a workplace without health is not a workplace, it's a slow erosion of brilliance. And brilliance is our responsibility to protect. Then we continue. Because brilliance, once protected, becomes unstoppable. It compounds. It inspires. It elevates not just the individual, but everyone connected to them. And this is the forgotten truth of every high-performing organization. The greatest innovations don't come from pressure. They come from permission. Permission to pause. Permission to breathe. Permission to question the status quo, not fear it. Permission to bring not just your skills to work, but your soul. Because the soul knows when it's being drained. It knows when it's being used instead of valued. It knows when it's in an environment built for machines, not miracles. And make no mistake, every human being is a miracle. A living, breathing miracle with ideas, instincts, energy, and intuition that no machine could ever replicate. But treat them like robots, and they'll begin to malfunction. Ignore their humanity, and they'll begin to withdraw. Disregard their well-being. And you'll watch your best people walk away, not out of disloyalty, but out of survival. Because health isn't just something people want. It's something people need. And if your workplace doesn't offer it, people will go looking for it elsewhere. And they should. Because we are past the era of toxic loyalty. Past the age of sacrificing health for a paycheck. Past the myth that suffering is noble. That grinding yourself to dust is the path to significance. It's not. It never was. Significance comes from being fully alive. Fully engaged, fully resourced mind, body, and spirit. And the workplace has the power to be the source of that life or the thief of it. So choose. Design. Lead with intent. Create environments where wellness isn't reactive, it's proactive. Where healing isn't an afterthought, it's built in. Where mental health isn't a box to check, it's a standard to uphold. Because your workplace doesn't just shape what gets done. It shapes who your people become while doing it. And there is no greater ROI than creating an environment where people become more of themselves, not less. Because those people, they don't just perform, they transform. And those who transform, they leave traces behind. Not just in the numbers, the projects, the deliverables, but in the way others speak of them, in the way the culture bends and breathes differently after they've been there, in the way new hires walk into the room and immediately feel the residue of dignity. That's what a healthy workplace does. It leaves residue of belief, residue of care, residue of high standards wrapped in high compassion. Because when someone grows in an environment where their health was honored, they carry that code into every room they'll ever enter. They become ambassadors of that atmosphere. They lead others the way they were led, with strength and softness interwoven. And that is how movements begin. One culture, one choice, one brave decision to no longer sacrifice people on the altar of progress. To say, here, we do it differently. We don't chase numbers and lose souls. We don't wear burnout like a badge of honor. We don't apologize for taking care of ourselves. We lead from wholeness. We build from balance. We win from well-being. And the irony? That's when the real winning begins. Because when you create a workplace where people don't just function, they flourish. They begin to generate results. You could never squeeze out of them with pressure. They create from overflow, not obligation. They collaborate with energy, not ego. They innovate because they believe, not because they're being watched. That's the edge now. Not speed, not size, not scale, but sustainability. Your ability to build something that lasts because it's built with wisdom, with rhythm, with the audacity to say, the health of our people is the health of our performance. Because you can no longer separate the two. Try, and you'll pay the price in turnover, in disengagement, in breakdowns behind polite smiles. But honor them, connect them, center them. And your workplace becomes the kind of place that doesn't just attract top talent. It grows whole humans. Because growing whole humans, that's the real work now. Not assembling productivity machines. Not polishing perfect resumes. Not creating compliant bodies that move fast but feel nothing. But cultivating humans who can think deeply, feel fully, lead wisely, and last. Humans who don't just have skills, they have stamina. They don't just meet metrics, they carry meaning. They don't just adapt to culture, they elevate it. That's what a healthy workplace produces. Not just employees, but examples. Not just outputs, but outcomes that ripple into families, into communities, into generations. Because when someone experiences safety at work, they become safer people. When someone is believed in at work, they become believers, not just in the company, but in themselves. When someone is allowed to pause, to heal, to speak, they become bolder, braver, more alive in every area of life. And that is leadership. That is legacy. That is how you turn a company into a cause. Not by shouting louder, but by listening deeper. Not by driving harder, but by aligning truer. Because the truth is, pressure can create diamonds, but it also crushes bones. And most people aren't looking to be diamonds. They're looking to be whole, to be well, to be welcomed. And if you give them that, if you give them the space to breathe, to grow, to stretch and stumble and rise again, they will give you their best. Not out of fear, not for survival, but out of devotion. Because loyalty birthed from health is stronger than anything forced by fear. So let the next chapter of your company be written in the language of life. Let every hallway, every meeting, every system be a mirror reflecting back this truth. You are not a machine. You are not your output. You are not your title. You are not your to-do list. You are a person, and that means everything. That is the revolution. Not louder, not faster, but deeper, truer, more human. Then let's press further. Because this isn't just a shift in culture. It's a shift in consciousness. A remembering, a returning to the wisdom we were born with and the truth we've forgotten. That real strength doesn't scream. It sustains. That real success doesn't rush. It roots. That real leadership doesn't dominate. It dignifies, and dignity. That's the missing element in so many modern workplaces. We teach people how to scale, how to pitch, how to negotiate, but who teaches us how to honor? How to sit with someone and say, your health matters more than this deadline? How to create systems that don't extract, but empower? How to build growth that doesn't come at the cost of grace? We've been taught that results are everything, but what if they aren't? What if the true result, the real win, is creating a place where people are healed by the very act of showing up? Where people are not diminished by doing their job, but discovered by it, expanded by it, transformed by it? What if the goal isn't just to grow the business, but to grow the being? And that's possible. It's happening. You've seen glimpses in the leader who actually listens, in the team that lifts each other without competition, in the day you walked away from work more energized than when you arrived. That's not coincidence. That's culture. And culture is not created in one grand gesture. It's created in the daily decision to choose life over logistics, people over pressure, wholeness over hustle. It's found in the moment you pause before responding, in the space you leave for rest, in the systems you design that breathe, in the values you live when no one's watching. Because values don't live on the wall. They live in the walk. And when you walk in alignment with health, you walk in power. Not flashy power, but quiet, unshakable power. The kind that builds legacies, not just launches. The kind that weathers storms because it's built on soul, not speed. And when soul enters the workplace, truly enters, everything begins to bloom. Because when everything begins to bloom, you realize this was never about business. It was about becoming more aware, more aligned, more awake to what truly matters. You see, the workplace has always been more than desks and deadlines. It's where people spend the majority of their lives. It's where they prove themselves, question themselves, sometimes lose themselves. It's where stories unfold, identities form, and futures are forged. And if we are careless with that space, if we let it become a place of pressure, performance, and pretending, we don't just lose productivity. We lose people. We lose their joy. We lose their voice. We lose their magic. But if we are intentional, if we make it a place of wholeness, of humanity, of healing, we don't just win. We transcend. We redefine what winning even means. Because winning is not numbers alone. Winning is walking through your doors and knowing, here, I can grow. Here, I can breathe. Here, I can bring my fear, my fire, my full self and still be respected. Here, I am safe to struggle, safe to stretch, safe to shine. And if you've ever worked in a place like that, as you remember it, not for the pay, not for the perks, but because something inside you woke up. That's what health does. It awakens. It recalibrates. It brings people back to life. And a team that feels alive will always outperform one that's merely obedient, because alive people innovate. Alive people care. Alive people create culture with every breath, every gesture, every conversation. That's what makes a company unforgettable. Not the logo, not the products, but the people, the way they made each other feel, the way they made you feel. So build that, design that, prioritize that unapologetically. Because when you do, you won't just run a business. You'll raise a movement. And a movement doesn't just change what people do, it changes who they become. It elevates their standard, their self-worth, their sense of what's possible. It teaches them that work isn't just a place to survive, it can be a place to evolve, to step into the next version of themselves, not by force, but by freedom. Freedom to question outdated norms. Freedom to protect their peace. Freedom to lead without sacrificing their humanity. Because when people are free, truly free, they don't abuse that freedom. They rise to it. They honor it. They become stewards of it. And that's what leadership really is. Stewardship, not ownership, not domination, but the sacred responsibility to protect what matters most. People. Because everything you build will rise or fall on the wellness of the people who carry it. And if they break, it breaks. So why not build in a way that strengthens them instead? Why not create structures that support rest, not just output? Why not champion boundaries instead of exploiting them? Why not normalize asking for help and reward the courage it takes to be honest? Why not turn your workplace into a human greenhouse where people don't have to dim themselves to belong, but where their growth is the very point? Imagine that. Imagine a world where the workplace is no longer a drain, but a source of energy, not exhaustion, a source of purpose, not pressure, a source of strength, not stress, where mental health days aren't whispered, they're honored, where performance reviews don't just grade outcomes, they celebrate growth, where success is not just speed and volume, it's depth and longevity. That world isn't some distant dream. It's a decision, a culture you choose, a code you write, one meeting, one policy, one act of courage at a time. And the leaders who choose it, they don't just lead teams. They lead revolutions, because revolutions don't always begin with shouting. Sometimes they begin with silence, with the kind of silence that listens deeply, that hears what hasn't been said, that senses the weariness behind the winds, that recognizes the quiet resignation behind the smiles. And in that silence, a new kind of leader is born. Not the loudest, not the toughest, but the most tuned in to the rhythms of their people, tuned in to the cost of constant striving, tuned in to the truth that excellence without empathy is erosion. Because when you are truly tuned in, you can no longer tolerate the old way. You can't stand to see people worn down in the name of performance. You can't look at disengagement and call it laziness. You can't build strategies that neglect souls. You feel it. And once you feel it, you're called to fix it. That's leadership. That's responsibility. Not to maintain what's broken, but to break what no longer serves. To burn the script that says, keep pushing, keep pretending, keep producing, no matter the price. And write a new one that says, you are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to need. You are allowed to lead without losing your life. Because this is the new bottom line. No goal is worth it if it costs your people. No milestone matters if your team is miserable. No legacy is legendary if it leaves bodies behind. But when you lead from health, when you lead from wholeness, you unlock something unstoppable. You create a culture that's resilient, not because it ignores pain, but because it moves with it. You build teams that don't fracture under pressure because they were never pretending to be perfect. You generate momentum that lasts because it was built on care, not coercion. And you become the kind of leader people never forget, not because of your power, but because of your presence. You made them feel safe. You made them feel seen. You made them feel human again in a world that keeps trying to turn people into parts. Then let's carry it forward, because the end is not a conclusion. It is a culmination, a rising, a reckoning, a return to what we forgot while chasing what we were told to want. Because somewhere along the way, we began to believe that power meant pressure, that greatness meant exhaustion, that success required suffering. But now we remember, success built on sacrifice of the soul is not success. It is collapse in slow motion. It is ambition without alignment. It is glory with a ticking clock behind it. And no one was born for that. No one came into this world with light in their eyes, just to be dulled by deadlines. So we reclaim it. We reclaim what it means to work, to build, to lead, to matter. We reclaim the idea that a workplace can be holy ground. That showing up every day doesn't have to drain you, it can develop you. That rest is not retreat. It is the rhythm of revolution. That people don't just power the company, they are the company. And when they are well, everything flourishes. Innovation becomes intuitive. Collaboration becomes second nature. Results become inevitable not through force, but through flow. Because a person aligned with their values is a person who cannot be bought or broken. And a team aligned with its purpose becomes a force that no competition can replicate. You want the real edge? It's not in your tech. It's not in your capital. It's not in your processes. It's in the soul of your people. And the soul can't thrive in chaos. It needs care. It needs clarity. It needs connection. So build that. Protect that. Speak life into that. Because when we speak life, we don't just inspire, we awaken. Then let's awaken it fully, no holding back. Let's awaken the truth that's been buried beneath bureaucracy. Let's strip away the illusion that titles and salaries are enough to sustain the human spirit. Let's shatter the myth that people exist to serve the system and rebuild the truth that systems exist to serve the people. Because without the people, there is no system, no vision, no execution, no future. So why are we still designing environments where people have to shrink just to survive? Why do we normalize anxiety and call it drive? Why do we glorify burnout and call it ambition? Let it end with us. Let it end right here, right now. The era of treating health as optional. The mindset that equates worth with productivity. The culture that values urgency over understanding. Because when we end those lies, we begin something far greater, a movement of workplaces that heal, that hold, that empower, places where leaders are measured not by how many tasks they complete, but by how many people they uplift. Where wellness isn't a buzzword, it's the backbone. Where strength is shown through rest, not repression. Where honesty is honored, not penalized. Where a person doesn't have to hit rock bottom to be told they matter. Because they matter now. Not when they've closed the deal. Not when they've crushed the quarter. Not when they've proved themselves for the 100th time. But now in their raw, real, resting humanity. And that kind of culture, it creates miracles. People begin to do the kind of work they were born for. Not because they're pushed, but because they're pulled by purpose. And purpose, when supported by health, becomes unstoppable. Then let us bring it home not as a final word, but as a sacred reminder, a calling, a commitment, a fire that must never go out. The future does not belong to companies that crush competition. It belongs to those who cultivate compassion. It belongs to workplaces where strength is measured in trust, where success is a shared state, and where well-being is the air everyone breathes, not a privilege for the few. Because when we choose to build differently, we don't just change productivity. We change people. And changed people change everything. So let this be your legacy. Not that you led the biggest team. Not that you broke records. But that you built something where no one had to break themselves to belong. That you were the one who stood up and said, we can go fast and stay well. We can rise and remain whole. We can win without losing what matters most. The importance of workplace health is not a tactic. It's a philosophy. It's a revolution. It's the beginning of a better world, led by better leaders who see the full human behind every role and choose to lift them. So speak life. Build with heart. Protect the soul of your system. Because in the end, real greatness is not how much you built, but how well your people lived while building it. That is workplace health. That is power. That is legacy. And it begins with you.